What if one of the greatest plays ever written was born from grief? Before the legend, before the fame, before Hamlet, there was a boy named Hamnet, and this is the story about the mother who lost him. And yes, today we're talking about Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. I read the book first, and then I saw the movie, and they were both incredible, and I'm obsessed with them, and of course I had to come here and talk about them because that's what I do. I do have to say that before reading this, I wasn't such a big Shakespeare fan. Of course, I know his plays. I've seen Romeo and Juliet, the musical. I've seen some scenes. I knew what everybody knows about him. So before reading this book, I would have wished to know a few things, and here they are. So William Shakespeare's name isn't really mentioned in the book because the author wanted the focus to be on his wife, Agnes, or Anne Hathaway. But you are given pretty much a lot of clues as to who he might be, and he is referred to throughout the book as the Latin tutor, the father, the son, the husband, so it's pretty easy to figure out who he is. Second thing I would have liked to know is that the book goes between right before Hamnet's death and Agnes's and Will's past, so that was a tiny bit confusing, but I quickly got the hang of it. And in this video, I will be giving out spoilers, so if you do not want to spoil the book for yourself, click away. Now, let's get into the most important characters of this book. So, first of all, we have William Shakespeare. As I said earlier, he is referred to as the Latin tutor, the husband, the father. Next up we have Agnes, and this is his wife, also known as Anne Hathaway. Then Agnes and Will have their first daughter, her name is Susanna. Then they later have the twins, Hamnet and Judith. And important thing to know is that Judith is a really sick child, and she gets sick pretty quickly, and her health is just horrible. And the last important character, in my opinion, is Bartholomew, Agnes's brother. Let's get into what happens during the book. I will talk about these events in chronological order, unlike the book. So let's talk about Agnes's childhood. Her mother was what the villagers called a forest witch. She was a very intuitive person. She used herbs for healing, and she was very connected to nature. And so Agnes's mother meets Agnes's father, and they fall in love, and they have Agnes. And then Agnes's brother comes along, named Bartholomew. Sadly, our main character's mother passes away during childbirth, and her father is forced to marry a different woman, which he ends up having multiple kids with. Time skip to a few years later after Agnes's father dies. William Shakespeare is forced by his father to teach Agnes's half-brothers Latin because William's father was in debt to Agnes's father. So one day, as William Shakespeare is teaching the boys Latin, he sees this girl emerging from the woods with a hawk on her arm, and that is Agnes. Later on, he goes to find her, and they have a little chat, and he's mystified by Agnes's peculiar personality, and she also does this thing where she takes people's hands like so, and she grabs their skin between the thumb and the forefinger, and she can see into that person's soul. So they quickly fall in love, obviously, and they know that their parents wouldn't allow them to get married. First of all, because William was 18 and Agnes was around 26, I believe. And second is that Agnes was considered this witch. So what do? Agnes gets pregnant so that they force their parents to let them marry each other. A few months pass and Agnes feels that she is ready to give birth, so she leaves Stratford-upon-Avon where the action happens. She leaves Will's house and goes into the forest and gives birth to the baby. And that baby is their first daughter, Susanna. Everybody from Will's family freaks out because they cannot find her, but eventually Will goes to Bartholomew and Bartholomew knows exactly where she is and they find her and everything is well. Slowly, William is losing his spark due to the fact that his father is abusive and he doesn't really have that creative power anymore because his father is making him run all of these errands, deliveries for gloves because his father was a glove maker, and he slowly falls into depression. Agnes sees that and she goes to her brother Bartholomew. Together they develop a plan in order to send William into London so that he can sell gloves there and find his spark and get back into writing. And Bartholomew convinces Will's father to send him away. But we have a teeny little problem. Agnes is pregnant. But that doesn't stop Agnes from sending her husband away because she doesn't want him to be sad. So Will leaves for London. Now, if you've seen the movie or read the book, you know what's coming, and the scene in the movie absolutely destroyed me. Agnes gives birth to twins. And initially she wants to flee to the woods again, as she did to the first birth. But she's quickly stopped by Will's mother, who traps her in the house and forces her to give birth there. And this leads to a very traumatic event for her. So she ends up giving birth to her son, Hamnet. And until that point, she believes that she will only have 2 children because she saw in one of her visions that on her deathbed there will be 2 children standing in front of her. To her surprise, she ends up having twins and she gives birth to Judith. Well, it's a stillbirth because Judith is presumably dead after Agnes gave birth to her. And to everybody's surprise, Agnes does a bit of her witchy magic and the baby comes back to life. William doesn't really write home that often because he says that he's busy in London at the Playhouse and that he is working on his business and writing, and that upsets Agnes a bit. And then we do another time skip to right before Hamnet's death. So one day as Hamnet and Judith were playing, the girl gets sick, starts having a fever. So Hamnet ends up looking for people all around the house and he can't find anybody. He goes in town to find a doctor, the doctor isn't there. He comes back home and Judith is getting worse and worse. At some point, Agnes comes back and she freaks out because her daughter was dying. So Susanna, the first daughter, writes to her father that he should come as fast as he can because his daughter is on the deathbed. Hamnet, as the sweet and caring boy he is, climbs into Judith's bed and hopes that death will come for him and leave her alone, which it eventually does. And Agnes has a full mental breakdown as any mother would. And so as she prepares her son for the burial, William comes home and he sees that Judith is all right and he hugs her and he says, "Oh my God, thank God you're alive," or something like that. And then he sees the body of Hamnet on the table and he couldn't believe it. What happens next is what truly shocked me. After Hamnet's death, William decides that he will go back to London because the theater needs him more than his family, which was such a shitty move. Like, your kid just died, your wife is crying, and you decide to, the theater needs me more than you guys do. I'm gonna get out of here. Like, are you for real? That was my exact reaction. And so Agnes gets very, very, very angry at him, but that does not stop him. Months pass and he rarely writes back to them. And so after about a year, he comes back home. As everybody is eating dinner, William talks about his experience in London and his plays and the actors, and he starts giving everybody gifts. And he gives Agnes this bracelet, and she puts it on, and it's a very fancy bracelet, and she wonders how he had the money to get this. And she gets this sensation that this bracelet was worn before by a woman, and that Will is cheating on her, and she storms out of the room. And then William goes after her, and they have this whole talk about how he wasn't there for her, and that he doesn't know how to deal with grief. And I will read the page for you. I would have cut out my heart and given it to him if it would have made any difference. I know. You don't know. You weren't there. Judith was so ill. I was so intent on her that I was thinking I should have paid more attention to him. I never saw what was coming. I always thought she was the one who would be taken. I cannot believe that I was so blind, so stupid too. Agnes, you did everything. You tried everything. The sickness was too strong. You weren't here, she says again. And this scene is truly one of my favorite scenes from the book, because Agnes stands up for herself, and she tells William that he should have been there, and that it was not okay for him to leave right after his son's death, and that he should have stayed with his family. And later on, she goes telling him that he created this place in his head that he cannot get out of, and that he's focusing too much on his work, and that he should have stayed with his family. And in order to redeem himself, what does William do? He buys the biggest house for his daughters and his wife. And so time passes, and Agnes, along with her daughters, live a peaceful life in their new big house, which, by the way, it was the biggest house in Stratford-upon-Avon. And the villagers were very jealous of William, and they were all gossiping about him, asking one another, like, what could he be doing to get this much money? When William visits them, which is very rare, William and Agnes start to get along as they once used to. But that is quickly ruined by the new play that William wrote called Hamlet. And when Agnes sees this, she's very upset, because how dare he use the name of their dead son to create a play. And Susanna asks her mother, aren't you interested in what the play is about? And the woman gets an idea, and that is to go to London, to the playhouse, to see what the play is about. She doesn't want to go alone. She takes her brother Bartholomew along with her. And so the journey is long, but they end up in London, and they search for William's house. Both are very surprised by his way of living. In his little flat, he only had a bed and his writing desk and a bunch of knickknacks. I remember from the book, in that same exact scene, either Bartholomew or Agnes said that I cannot believe that this is where the man with the biggest house in Stratford upon Avon lives. And so they leave his flat and they end up at the Globe, which, if you don't know what that is, it's perfectly fine. I didn't know beforehand either. The Globe is Shakespeare's theater that you can still visit. It's in London, but it was reconstructed, I think. Agnes goes in and she's very confused by the way people acted. It was chaos in there, but the play quickly starts and she has a physical reaction when she hears the name Hamlet. And she doesn't really understand how the name of her son is connected to the play, and she thinks it's very offensive, but she realizes that this is the way her husband mourns, and she's very touched by that. And so one of the most important themes in this book is obviously grief, and that people grieve in different ways, and we've seen Agnes, and she has a mental breakdown. She cries, she screams, she's in depression. And then we have William, who throws himself back into work and writes one of the most brilliant plays. And I know this book is about grief, but I don't know why it felt very peaceful to me. I highly recommend this book and the movie. I've also seen the movie. I recommend reading the book first, as I did, and then seeing the movie. This book is absolutely incredible. I love it with all my heart. It's definitely made its way to my favorite books. And I really want to know your opinions about this book, because I've seen reviews where people say that it's not such a good book. They don't see the point of this book. So what do you think? Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time.